Welcome to another Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Sign up for a premium membership, get all of my NHL and Bruins writing sent directly to your inbox. I also file columns 3 times a week for the Boston Sports Journal about the Boston Bruins, so please go to bostonsportsjournal.com, sign up for a membership there. You get my stuff, you get Mike Giardi, you get Greg Bedard, you get a cast of thousands and some very talented people covering all the major Boston pro sports teams. So please check that out. With me today, I have my longtime friend and colleague, Mick Colageo. Mick, please tell everybody where they can find your work.
They can find my work, bing, at Sunday columns at bostonhockeynow.com, seasonal major issues of the hockey news where you find the Bruins in that pack, and also my Rink Wrap blog, which will be revived soon.
Very good. Check all of that out, and we always thank Mick for being on with us as well. Let's get into it. Not a ton of Bruins news. I talked a little bit the other day with Mark Allred just about the latest Jeremy Swayman stuff. One thing I did think was interesting is he had some sort of comment, and I didn't write it down, but he had a comment where it basically said, I know I'm going to be playing. I hope it's with the Bruins. It was something, I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like that.
Yeah.
And
I believe our guy Andrew Fantuccio quoted the same line from Sway when he got done with the triathlon in Southie.
Yes, that's what it was. It was the triathlon in Southie, and it was that. I mean, that's the first time he's like hedged at all, sort of talking about it, and it wasn't the I am going to be a Bruin. I know it's going to work out. Like it's it's just a matter of like if this was a little more negotiating 101. Maybe his agent told him to sort of like hedge what he was saying a little bit, or starting to play the game a little as far as negotiating goes, and sort of being lukewarm about the whole thing.
Read between the lines. I'm signing that offer sheet, baby.
Well, I don't think it's anything like that. I think this is more traditional negotiating. Like he's trying to make the Bruins side, their side's trying to make the Bruins side a little nervous that there's something up their sleeve, or that they
Yeah, nobody wants to give up any ground right now.
No, and like that if they're not happy, they might end up wanting to go elsewhere. Like that, they're just basically trying to put a little uncertainty into the Bruins stance, which clearly I don't think has probably changed for a while now. So like what did you read, or what could you read out of that comment? Did you read that much into it? Am I reading too much into it? But I thought it was very purposeful that he said that, rather than like, no question, I'm going to be with the Bruins, and that's where I'm going to be.
I just thought of something funny. I was going to give a free commercial to these guys because this is what all the Bruins fans are reaching right now for. Yeah. But they're not reaching for smut. But I look backwards in the screen here. So
that's right. That's right.
But in any case, I do believe they are reaching for those or the Rolaids. So it certainly adds a little agita to a Bruins fan's summer for the biggest fish to be the one that is still in a nebulous place. And if this was, say, the Harry Sinden era, there would have been media, there would have been overtures in the paper, Yeah. Sway would have been told to get his fishing gear ready for some salmon hooking, I mean, there'd be a lot of overtures.
Yes.
And I think that right now,
the Joey Juneau yodeling thing comes to mind.
That's right. That's a classic one from 1994 when Joey Juneau was told to practice his yodeling when he threatened to go play in Switzerland.
Right.
And next thing you know, he's traded for Big Ally Afraidy, who was quite the truck. Unfortunately, his back gave out while the Bruins had him. Otherwise, he would have been a heck of a player. Yep. He was gunning a back nine, but he could still do it. That was a tough outcome for the Bruins. They really wound up losing a heck of an asset there that they wound up doing under duress, and they wound up getting a compromised player whose body was starting to fail him, a hulk of a man. and a great hockey player, L.A. Afraidy.
Yeah.
So now here we go we got the, they make the move. Linus Ullmark is now out of the system. He's with the Ottawa Senators, and the Bruins are got their eyes for Jeremy Swayman, and somewhere upon the line, we've stayed quiet all summer. This is the two sides are going to finally meet somewhere in the middle of the ocean. They're going to get there, and nobody should worry. And here we are. The last word is they're pretty far apart, per Elliot Friedman. Right. So what really does all this mean, and what's it going to come down to? I think the good thing about being in this modern era is that not the sides more, concerned for optics and professionalism when addressing these matters. At the same time, the players are always in peak condition when they get to camp. Yeah. So we don't have to worry about Swayman having had a bad off season because of this situation. I think that when I look back, I know I harp on this and Razor probably hates me for it, but Nick Boynton and Andrew Raycroft were two excellent young players for the Bruins. Razor won Rookie of the Year in the NHL in 03-04, which was Bergeron's rookie year.
Yep.
Nick Boynton was at the end of year 3 of his NHL career as the Bruins 1A defenseman, and neither one had a good lockout year when there was no NHL season. And they both came to camp as RFAs who were told to sit and wait while Mike O'Connell went through scurrying like Super Bowl Sunday at 6:15 p.m. and there's nothing on the shelves, and you're trying to find a loaf of bread, a bag of chips, and get something back home to watch the big game. And there's very little to pick from because the strategy that the Bruins used in letting their contracts go on, something Jeremy Jacobs told me was something that Gary Bettman told all NHL owners to do.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody did it. The 24% offer for across the league rollback on salaries was incorporated into the new CBA that included the $39.5 million salary cap. The floor is higher than that now, by the way. And
yes, it is.
And they
88 million. Well, 88 million is the number for this year, Mick. It's crazy.
Right. So we have $5 million higher than the first cap, and when the NHL was on Outdoor Life Network. So they've come a long way, baby. Now, we don't have that situation that those guys ran. That was a perfect storm for the two best young players, Bergeron joining them. Really, unfortunately, their careers went off the rails.
Yep. In this day and age, we don't have to worry about that. Jeremy Swayman's going to make sure that Jeremy Swayman's ready to go. Yep. And there's a hyper professionalism that these things just don't happen in today's game. So I think that what we have now is a situation where both sides need to just be reasonable and find a place to meet so we can get on with it. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it becomes more challenging for Jeremy Swayman to do that, though, if it goes into training camp and he hasn't signed, right? That's when it becomes to get a little more difficult to stay in the type of shape and readiness that you need to be in. And then, I think he mentioned like skating at BU sometimes when the guys at Warrior aren't there. So he'll have options and different things. But it's going to be more difficult once it gets to the point where everybody's stepping up the work that they're doing and everybody's working together at training camp if he's not there and he has to, supplement by doing something else. And I think that's when it becomes a little more challenging. And that's when it becomes really like sort of a danger area, is once he starts missing that kind of time, if he hasn't signed a contract. And I just think I thought I took those comments, even though they were quick, to it was a change in tone, and it was sort of a change in sort of like the way we should look at this, where I think it's getting a little more sort of, us versus them, or sort of, the pages from the playbook of negotiations in these sort of situations, I think are starting to get used. You know what I mean? I think the negotiating 101 playbook is starting to get pulled out by both sides. And I think the first one was Lewis Gross and Swayman pulling out that page where they kind of hedge on, where he's going to be and what's going to happen, and sort of the long-term future is sort of casting a little doubt there to make for a little uneasiness on the other side. And then that's when it can start the whole thing sort of going back and forth a little bit. And it's going to be interesting because I don't think typically the Bruins sort of engage in a lot of that. I don't think Don Sweeney really
zero.
Walks down
the closest he ever came was DeBrusk.
It's going to be one of those things where I don't think this is going to go the way that Swayman and Lewis Gross would like it to go, where they kind of, there's a little back and forth, or there's a familiar terrain that they're going to go in negotiations, because I just don't think the Bruins engage in that. And I think they know that. Lewis Gross certainly knows that from having worked closely with Don Sweeney and the Bruins during Torrey Krug's negotiations, because he was the same agent for Torrey Krug, the agent here for Jeremy Swayman. But it's just interesting sort of that, this is sort of where we're at with training camp still a month away, that this kind of thing is coming down the pipe.
Right. We all thought, I shouldn't speak for anybody else, I thought this would have been over by now.
Yeah, I didn't.
So I didn't see us getting to this point, and we are getting it's getting a little late in the summer here. The nights are cooler. The kids are starting to practice in football, and Swayman is not signed.
Well, Mick,
that sounds a little weirdly old school Bruins right now.
Does it make you pause at all to hear that? To hear Swayman say that?
It makes sense for it to have gone this far that he should say that, because if I'm in his shoes, then I got doubt in my mind.
Right.
And the fact that he was his cheerful self and saying that, this is what he wants. This is what he wants. He hopes it is with the Bruins. That little parenthetical remark shows that he's quite aware that this situation has reached a point where doubt is creeping in.
Yeah. And part of it too, I'm sure, is from his end. I'm sure he feels like he deserves whatever he's asking for, and he's earned whatever he's asking for. And I'm sure what's going through his head is that they're not showing me the love, or they're not giving me what I want, even though I've worked really hard and I've, gotten to this point where I've done all these things. But I
don't know about that second part.
I think they need to be aware that, and I've said this a million times, there are no goalies out there that have put up what Swayman has put up to this point and are making $9 million a year or $8.5 million a year, or getting anything close to that kind of a huge contract. There's got to be some self-awareness there to, this is where I am in my career. This is what I've done to this point. This is what other goalies that have done what I've done to this point have been paid. And this is sort of my market, and this is what my asking range should be. And to be perfectly frank, if they give him $7.5 million a year on a 7 or 8 year deal, that's more money than any goalie that's put up his body of work to this point has ever gotten in the history of the NHL. It would be unprecedented to give him that much money and that rich of a contract. And I think, that could be where it ends up being if and when it gets done between these two sides. And I think that's something that they should take as a victory and feel happy about if they get to that point, because that's going to raise the bar for all the other goalies out there. I continue to have a hard time seeing him getting 8 point something to 9 million, somewhere in that range, for a goalie that's never played more than 44 games in a year, for a goalie that's never been a Vezina Trophy finalist, that's really only got votes this past season, that's never been a number one guy before. I don't know how you can ask for that much on a long-term deal and expect to get it. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. Right now, you can take advantage of Caitlin Clark racking up triple doubles and dropping dimes in every game that she's playing, or hop on the Jaron Duran train as he's posting big offensive numbers in just every statistical category down the line. If you're looking for promotions, then PrizePicks has got you covered, from lowering select players' stat projections on Tuesdays to helping your lineup hit or getting your entry fee back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. There is plenty of Prize Picks to get bang for your hard-earned buck. I made my first $10 deposit and received an instant $10 bonus. If you have the skills, you can play for a shot at turning your 10 into $1,000. It's fun and pretty simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
I think for him, this is where he moves the needle. He's thinking, look, you agree with me about what I am. You just proved it. And every opportunity I've gotten, I've crushed, including in the playoffs. Yeah. And the whole league loves me. Yep. People extol the virtues of my game all around the league. I'm considered one of the elite goalies in the league. League-wide, that's the case. Yep. And not only that, we're in a trend. We're in a trend where Group 2 free agents, RFAs, get the big career contracts before they even have the leverage of arbitration rights. That is true. And so how do you justify paying Pasta what you paid Pasta, or McAvoy what you paid McAvoy, when and then tell me that I don't fall into that category where I'm a developing player that you've identified as a core piece of your franchise. You've seen enough to make the decisions to put me in these roles. I've answered the call, and you completely show every move you make indicates that you believe that that's my future, but you want to not pay me that way because my resume isn't as long. I mean, I feel like the NHL is a changing animal right now where it comes to this stuff, and Swayman wants in on it, and I think that's his argument.
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, that should be his argument, and that can be his argument. I still think goalies are viewed differently than, say, a Brock Faber, who got, like what you're talking about, got shown a huge deal by the Minnesota Wild well before, like, he's going to reach any kind of free agency level. Like, I think some of these other players, Brock Faber's played a full season as a #1 defenseman, basically, for the Minnesota Wild. Like, that's part of the reason he's getting paid what he's getting paid, is because, like, even though they're young, they've at least shown, like, that they can do it, Like Swayman, I feel like Swayman's in a little bit of a different category because he hasn't even shown it for one season yet, really, that he can fully be the 60-game, like, workhorse, carry them all the way. Like, you're right. He's proven something, and there should be monetary value for the playoff run they went on, where he played out of his mind for a month, was the best player on the team, and really raised his profile across the league. And, like, and I've said this many, many times before, like, I noticed him the first day he came in training camp as a kid, as a young player coming from the University of Maine, because he just stood out as a goalie prospect, and he stood out even among goalie drills. Like, you noticed him right away. And, like, that is rare for me to notice a goalie when I'm watching a practice like that and see how good he is technically, how good he is athletically, and him, like, to make a difference, to show you something that makes you take note. Like, I think that's rare for goalie. Usually when you take note of a goalie, it's for negative things. It's not for good things in situations like that. And I think he did it because he's so talented, and because, like, he's clearly a very good goalie that's worked at his craft. So I believe 100% in Jeremy Swayman, and I think he will be that guy. I just don't think you can fully pay him like that guy until he's at least shown it for one season. That would be my thing. And that,
well, he's 20. Here's the other quandary. He's 25.
Right.
So how many years can you I don't think you can even do a 1-year contract, no. and he's still RFA. I think it'd be UFA.
Right. No. You can't do that. Like, that's what makes this challenging, though. That's what I think, and I think everybody has agreed this has been a challenging negotiation, and I think we're illustrating a lot of what's making it difficult for the two sides to come on the same page, is because I think there are a lot of things that make this unique and make this not like other negotiations, and it's not quite as cut and dry. And I think
Swayman's side is okay. And if you don't want to pay me X amount, pay me Y amount.
Right.
But only pay me for 2 years.
Right.
And then he's going to be UFA and he can walk. And then the Bruins, well, we don't want that. And it's like, well, then that means you believe that I'm this guy.
Right. Right. But
so which is it?
Yes. But I also think if Swayman truly is, and like, this is something Bruins players for a long time have done, is they don't go for every last coin that's on the table because they believe in what the team is doing and because they're, members of the organization.
That went out the window with McAvoy and Pasta.
Yeah, to a degree. Not with. I don't think Pasta's outlandish what he's getting paid. He could have gotten more. If he went to free agency, he would have gotten more. McAvoy, I think they wanted to lock up very early, and that's probably the best argument that Swayman would have as far as somebody that you paid maybe before they had fully shown that they were worthy of that kind of.
You identified a core piece and you paid him accordingly.
Yeah. So that's one of his best arguments for sure. But I still think with Swayman, I think you need to see it first. Goalie and paying a goalie that kind of money, you have to know that he can maintain his performance for like 60 games if he's going to be a workhorse. You have to know
do a 1 year deal then.
You have to know that he can do that before you can give him a 7-8 year deal at this massive money. You just
then I wouldn't. Then if I'm Swayman, sign me for 1 year then.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like that, and like I said, this is why this is challenging because
and name your price, and if I don't like it, guess who's not staying?
Yeah. Yeah, but like I mean, but this is the thing: is $7.5 million for a guy that's never played more than 44 games in the NHL an insult?
44 is a pretty good chunk.
It's not. It's barely half. It's not a good chunk. It's barely half.
I disagree because I don't think you need to be an old school 60 game a year guy in order to be a number one. I mean, I think the new model for the NHL is have a really capable backup, play 45 to 50. Be fresh because they need you for another 8 weeks.
Yeah. If you're starting to talk about like $13-14 million that you're devoting to your goaltending in your salary cap, that's a lot. That's like too much. That starts to impact what you can do as far as building the rest of the team and what you have as the rest of the pieces on the team. And that's where it becomes an issue. And that's where it becomes a problem is if you have to go like $1 million and $1.5 million more for Swayman, than you originally wanted to or planned to, that's when you start having to cut depth and other like valuable pieces, frankly. If you're going to be a Stanley Cup contender and a playoff team, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah, I think that's true for most teams. I don't think it's true for all teams because not all teams have a goalie this good.
No, I think
you have like if you make a half a dozen, like who's your 6 elite NHL goalies? I think Swayman's on that list.
I think it's true for all teams because if you're devoting that much money to goaltending amongst the limited salary cap space that you have, you're short shifting other positions in the depth of your roster. But we can agree to disagree on that. All right, EP Rinkside. Came up with their rankings, their prospect rankings, Mick. That's Elite Prospects, that website, which I think is a great website. Like when I am covering the draft, I find myself going to that website a ton because they have pages and profiles of like every kid basically that plays college, junior hockey at all kinds of different levels. Like there's all kinds of players on there. But they ranked the Bruins. It was JD Burke was the guy's name. He's the editor-in-chief, I guess, of their website as far as the written content and stuff goes. They ranked the Bruins 32nd in the NHL prospect list again this year. He said the Boston Bruins don't draft high and they don't pick off, and leaving them with the 32nd ranked prospect in our EP Rinkside rankings. I'm leading off the series by looking at a system that has legitimate NHL upside, but limited star power and depth. And, I just think, and like, obviously you've taken a bunch, like they took 4 or 5 players out of the prospect system last year and made them NHL players, or they developed into NHL players. So that's a big chunk of talent that you're taking from the prospect side. Now I would consider NHL players: Mason Lohrei, Matt Patra, Johnny Beecher, Justin Brazeau. But I still think if you're ranking the Bruins, if you continue to rank the Bruins 32nd every year in the prospect draft and development pipeline system, you're missing the point. You're short selling their prospects. You're short selling the efficiency of their system. Yes, they trade their first round picks. Yes, they have times when they're not picking in the first and second round. yes, they've been definitely more worried about competing and going all in for a few years now than and turning their first round picks into like a Hampus Lindholm or something like that, instead of like truly creating this draft and development machine that you would have if you like accumulated draft picks and if that was sort of your plan. But I also don't think you can be like a draft and development system that is pumping 4 players into roles on a playoff contending team and still like look at them as the worst in the NHL. Like there are a lot of other organizations that aren't able to do that, that aren't able to take young players and put them into a playoff caliber team and have them be like significant or impactful or like, you know, just useful pieces that you can have if they're playing at that level of play. So like, I just wonder why we continue to see the Bruins getting the short shrift here when it comes to their prospects, when like I would think any prospect guru that like was down on the Bruins last year and then watched how many of their young players were actually playing and playing well at the NHL level last year, why would that not make them take pause and be like, maybe I'm not giving them enough credit. Maybe I'm like coming down on the Bruins prospects or downgrading them more than I should. Maybe they're better than I thought they were. And I think this is across the board. I think it's become almost like this like in vogue thing among those prospect gurus to kick the Bruins around and think that their draft and development system is just not good enough, when I think the proof is in the pudding. They're cranking out NHL players. That tells me they're a lot better than 32nd in the NHL.
I think this goes back to 2015, and
Yeah,
I think that I think the teeth is still on the ankle, and I think that that's like, you've had how many drafts since then? 10. I mean,
Yeah.
So it's hard to believe, and I know that the book finally closed with the departure of Jake DeBrusk via free agency to Vancouver. So it's the end of a painful chapter, and that the legacy of the 2015 draft is now Brandon Carlo and by acquisition Pavel Zacha. So they didn't do as badly as advertised. It's just, what did we leave on the table? It could have changed everything. We could have been a dynasty. I could have been a contender, you know. So I just think that there's just so much legacy and so many barnacles on the boat from that I think it's colored the evaluation of all gray areas that have come in the decades since. And it's been a decade, and it's hard to believe we're actually there.
Yeah.
The next draft will be the 10th one since. So I think for me, the bigger piece right here is the Bruins went at it in Vegas at the end of June, going after guys who might be elites, and with an asterisk.
Yeah, Dean Letourneau is a great example of that, for sure.
So you got a guy who didn't play at the level. He decided not to go to junior hockey, which was his dream, because he realized that he wasn't going to get drafted at a position that would probably get him able to play in the Canadian major juniors. So he winds up going the college route. He winds up deciding to go the college route. So he hasn't even played at that level. He hasn't played at either level, but now he's going to go play at BC because San Jose was able to convince Will Smith to come out. So Smith goes NHL. Letourneau gets a spot at BC, and let's see how he makes out. It's a project. We won't know for 4 or 5 years, but in the end, he might be a hell of a rangy centerman with puck protection qualities that wind up making him a dominant force in the league.
Great shot.
But it'd be a late bloomer, and he can shoot the puck.
Yep.
So maybe this is what you get. Maybe you only get Michael Rasmussen. Maybe you only get Michael Handzus. You know, maybe you get sort of other Michaels, not Michael Colageo. He's better than that. So what you do get is a guy who is maybe a hope so. We're kind of bought a lottery ticket here. He might be a bust. He might be a great player. We don't know. They didn't go for something solid something that's really almost a virtual guarantee of an NHL regular. They could have done that. They didn't go for that. They shot for the moon. And every successive round, there's a guy that they picked who is got some sort of similar asterisk to his situation. He didn't play at the level that they're picking him at because they saw something that may push him past the people that would have been the appropriate pick, a late round pick. So all of these guys have that, and this is what the Bruins have done. So to me, I'm more intrigued by the 2024 draft than I am 2015. And I'm really interested to see if they just hit on one of these guys, it might be worth the whole philosophy. But if they hit on none of them, then that's a philosophical issue. It's not luck. It's a philosophical decision to say we're going to go for guys who are hiding in the bushes, that we think we saw something special, and we know that they're not on the same platform and stage as the guys who typically go in those positions. And this is, they think they know something. Let's find out if they do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's stressed quite a bit with the Letourneau pick because I think he perfectly typifies what you're talking about. Sort of like, you know, going for a high upside guy where there's risk involved as well, just because of the quality of competition that he's had. Some of the other ones, I think, you know, were pretty like standard picks. I think Letourneau was the one that absolutely qualifies, though. And that's the biggest one you're going to be looking at as a first round pick. That's really going to be sort of the flag bearer of that draft class and what you're going to sort of view it on at the end of the day. But like my takeaway from was that what you're talking about. And I remember saying that at the time, and I had sort of, when I wrote about it, had made the comparison to the, 2016, 2017 draft, the year they drafted Charlie McAvoy. When they picked Trent Frederick, Alex DeBrincat was sitting there, and they passed him over to take Trent Frederick. They took sort of the solid physical third line center type instead of going for the guy that had scored like 60 goals a year in the OHL and was clearly a small, skilled, like offensive dynamo. And I criticized him at the time, and I still feel like that probably was the better pick to go for the higher upside scoring, offensive forward guy that was available there. That was doing things at the OHL level that like not few people had been able to do like in history. Forget about that season. But I equated to that. I thought Letourneau was a little bit more of like going for a guy with that kind of upside instead of going for the safe, solid pick, the guy that's going to be a good NHL player for, 8 to 10 years, but not necessarily a star player. But the other part of it was, and it's a great point, Mick, the other part of it was that they didn't draft anybody, under 6'3" in this past draft class too. Like, I think there was definitely both at the NHL level and at their prospect level and at the players they're bringing in, there is a focus now on big, heavy, strong players like there wasn't in the past, which I think is an important sea change for them as well.
Which Don Sweeney flat out denied.
Of course he does. But then Charlie Jacobs...
He said it's coincidental.
But then Charlie Jacobs went on EI Nesson on the Jimmy Fun Telethon and basically said, yeah, we realized that we needed to get it like bigger and stronger. Like he kind of admitted it. He blew up the
he ratted out the GM.
Yeah, he blew up the Don Sweeney kind of poo-pooing it or playing it off. But it was obvious. It's obvious when you're looking at the players they're bringing in. It's obvious when you're looking at the players they're drafting that they are absolutely focused on bigger, heavier, more physical players that, frankly, are going to help you more in the playoffs. Like, they know that you need a requisite amount of skill. You need a requisite amount of playmakers, offensive players, like that kind of player in order to pile up points during the regular season. You need those guys in order to have good regular seasons. You need the skill. You need the offense. You need good two-way hockey, like the speed, all of it.
Decent power play.
Yeah, but you really, really need the in-your-face, physical, heavy players, the grinders in the playoffs in order to have success when the game changes. And you have
to be able to exact a measure of punishment on opposing defensemen going back on retrievals that accumulates over the course of a 7-game series. Yep. Something that the Bruins opponents in the last 5 years have done very, very well. Something the Bruins have done virtually zero of, and that's why they've only managed to win a couple of series here.
And you also need to have back-end players that are going to make it very difficult for you to get to their net. You need
Zadorov will help with that.
Yes, you need defensemen that are going to make you pay a huge price to get anywhere close to the net, are going to shut off plays, and are just going to make it miserable for you when you're in the offensive zone. And that's, Zadorov is a guy. And some of the guys that they've brought in, Christian Kostadinsky was one of them. There's a couple of that young Swedish defensemen they drafted this year. I remember those guys in development camp because they were huge physical defensemen that were like pounding guys. I thought one of them hurt Oscar Jelvik during the 3-on-3 tournament they had at the end of development camp because he was like blasting them towards the end of one of those 3-on-3 games. This big, huge defenseman, who granted they're not that fast. Granted they clearly aren't the most skilled defensemen in the world, but they were heavy and they leaned on you and they were mean. And those are the kind of guys that you need more of among your defenseman core if you really want to have success in the playoffs. And you could see it. You could see that the last few years they focused more on that. And it's important. I think that is important. And I think drafting for upside, like you're talking about, Mick, is extremely important too. And going for it, especially like for me, it's more important in the higher picks to really sort of go for it rather than be safe. The guys that you really think might have a skill level or a ceiling level that could really, really go up, and the really high upside players, the players that you're going to pick in the first couple of rounds. Like you can be safer with the players that you're taking in the lower rounds where you want to like get a guy that maybe he's going to turn into a solid NHL player, and it's less, it's not as high a risk or those players, those really high ceiling players might not be available in the 6th, 7th round, 5th round, whatever it is. But I think those two things have been definitely important. And I think they've helped the Bruins really raise their profile and their efficiency rate as to how they're like cranking out prospects. And getting back to the beginning of this conversation, I just think the Bruins don't get enough love for their prospects. And you're right. Maybe it goes back to 2015 and sort of fumbling that first round when they were trying to trade up to get Noah Hannafin and it didn't work out and they weren't expecting to make all those picks. And all of a sudden they had to make them and they weren't quite ready.
It didn't. The results looked like they didn't have a plan.
No,
which is hard to believe because you've got to figure that all the meetings they have that they probably had a lot of dissenting opinions.
Yeah.
And that might have been more the reason for what they wound up doing.
Yeah. Which, you should already have, like, if it doesn't work out and the trade doesn't materialize, you should have had those conversations ahead of time of like, what are we doing here? Who are we picking?
Of course they did. They had to have. They must just not have had a great consensus.
No. But like whatever the case may be, like I know Cam Neely said in recent years, we probably should have taken a time out there and really like got on the same page as to what we were doing at that point. And I think in hindsight, and it was, very early in the tenure of Don Sweeney. And like, it was, there was a perfect storm of stuff happening there. The
thing about that is that they didn't leave Alex DeBrincat on the table. They left probably a half a dozen impactful players on the table.
Kyle Connor, Brock Besser.
Brandon Carlo is such a good player. He fell all the way to deep in the second round. Sebastian Aho, a franchise center for the Carolina Hurricanes, fell to the second round. That draft was so good.
But it's not
that's what makes it painful is that so many teams hit in the next probably like 6 of the next 14 teams hit big.
No, and entire first round, like almost every other player that got picked after them was a star player or an impact.
That's what makes it tough. Yes. It's if everybody misses on one guy, that's one thing.
Right. Absolutely right. But I'm sure that sticks in a lot of like the prospect gurus, the draftniks heads. Looking for concert tickets for the rest of this summer, early fall. Last year, I used Game Time to get tickets to Def Leppard, Poison, Motley Crue, and Joan Jett at Fenway Park. And you can go out and get Fenway Park concert tickets this summer and this fall with Game Time. Pearl Jam's coming in September. I believe Post Malone is also coming to Fenway Park in September. So why not use Game Time to get your tickets for those concerts, in addition to the football action that you're going to have that's just starting up as well, that you can use Game Time to get Patriots tickets or any tickets to either NFL or college football all around. So it's fantastic using Game Time right now, taking the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. You can have all-in pricing, which is the feature shows you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. seat views. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price guarantee, which is my favorite, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply again, but create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, this is from Tom Johnson 314. Joe wanted to ask here instead of on Facebook, have you heard of any other team looking at Jeremy Swayman, or is that why Don is just doing nothing? I have not heard of any other teams. And Mick, you and I had talked about potential offer sheets, and the Utah being an interesting one. Certainly Detroit could be an interesting one. And that would be I would think somewhat of a tempting place for a player to go because they're on the rise. And it would certainly, if there was all of a sudden some rumor out there that Detroit was interested in Jeremy Swayman, that would certainly get the Bruins very nervous, I would imagine, with an offer.
I've done my best to stir it up.
But I still think I don't think you're going to see a team give up a first, a second, and a third round pick compensation wise for a goalie in a huge offer sheet. I just don't think that's going to happen. And I think the more pressing worry, concern, whatever, is that you can't come to terms with Jeremy Swayman on a contract if it goes that route, that eventually they're going to ask for a trade. If it gets to a point where he's holding out, he's not signed, it's getting acrimonious. I think the only way another team would get involved or something bad would happen is if all of a sudden a trade became the end result because there were too many hard feelings on both sides.
And that used to be the protocol, that
right.
If you decided that there was a team who was having a hard time with an RFA and you coveted the player, you would go to that team and say, hey, we're interested in your player. How about a trade? Otherwise, we might consider an offer sheet, but
right.
we'd really like to do a trade. That used to be the protocol. It was considered backstabbing, though, if you just offer sheeted the player.
Right.
What blows my mind is the Broberg-Holloway situation. Not that Edmonton decided, after apparently making moves to make space to sign those guys, they let them go to the Blues. But that day, they made another trade with the Blues. One that seems to me to really benefit the Oilers more than the Blues, which made me think one of two things just happened.
Yeah.
Either this subsequent trade was a condition on which they would let the two players go to the Blues.
Right.
So not only did they get NHL awarded compensation, they got their own negotiated on top of it.
Right.
Or we have an unprecedented moment in NHL collective bargaining era history where a team that should hate the team that offer sheeted their players went and did a trade with them. That day. That would be just unbelievable and unthinkable. So it makes me wonder now, I've never seen this before. I've never seen a team make a deal or propose a deal with a team that offer sheeted their players as a condition of them not signing. And now they say, what's the answer? It was future considerations. Right. Okay, future consider. I think it's past considerations.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was further compensation to sort of make it a situation where they would not re-sign the players, but the Oilers were somewhat satisfied with the compensation they got back. I think it was just sort of a make-right sort of trade after the fact, after signing the offer sheets, and that makes sense. And that's probably the right way to do it if you're Doug Armstrong, right?
That's a great tool. I've never seen anybody ever use it.
No,
I mean usually you just get Brian Burke breathing fire and brimstone is what you get. How dare you offer sheet somebody?
By the way, I loved Doug Armstrong when he was asked about the offer sheets. This was his quote. "This is a tool that I think everyone uses and should use. I think it was reported that I wouldn't have done this to Kenny Holland. That's the furthest thing from the truth. Quite honestly, I'd do it to my mother if she was managing the Oilers." Which I thought that was awesome. That's classic.
A great quote. I didn't hear that.
It's fantastic. All right. Let's move on to the next question. Hi, Joe. A few years ago, the narrative was that the Bruins have become very thin at the center position. Now the team has players like Lindholm, Coyle, Patra, Geeky, Beecher, and Kostelic available and under contract. Plus, there are prospects such as Merkulov, Farinacci, Kuntar, and Duran competing for spots. Do you have a sense of how the Bruins will resolve the center position this year and into the near future? Thanks. Love the podcast, Roger Perry. My guess is the 4 centers this year would be Lindholm, Coyle, I think maybe Geeky as the 3rd line center, and Kostelic as the 4th line center, with Trent Frederick can play center, Johnny Beecher can play center, like with a few other wingers that can potentially play center. But that would be my guess. I would guess that Matt Poitras is going to start in Providence unless he really comes into camp like ready to win that job and really shows like that he's over whatever sort of like fade you saw in his game a little bit in the second half before he got hurt. And frankly, I just think he needs to be faster. Like, I think if he went and like really worked on his power skating this summer and, gained a little bit more speed to get up to like where he needs to be at the NHL pace, like maybe he's got a shot as well. But I feel like he may end up in Providence, which I don't think is the worst thing in the world for him to really build up his offensive confidence, build his game back up, and really be ready to be an impact guy when he gets back to Boston, rather than foist those kind of expectations on him, right out of the gate at the start of the year. But like, I would guess Lindholm, Coyle, Geeky, and Kostelic as my top 4 centers to start the year. What about you, Mick?
Well, Poitras is an intriguing question here with the skating, because it's a little like Dave Krejci.
Yes.
You got a guy who was very soft on his feet, very comfortable on the ice, maybe not as stylish as Krejci with his movement, but
Krejci wasn't the fastest guy in the world either.
That's my point.
Yeah.
That his acceleration ability has always been just enough. And while Poitras, I think, is very good at using the speed he's got, the very first thing I noticed about him is that in addition to being a very skilled player with great rink awareness and original ideas on what to do with the puck and the ability to execute it, he has an awkward a stride that looks to me like he needs a skating guru to bring out a longer stride, a better push, something a little more productive, get his knees out a little far in front of him. There's just something about his skating that I feel like is maybe he's just gonna really change his style. Maybe his stride won't really change. Maybe he'll just be one of those guys who's like Adam Oates, a much more formidable skater and mover on the ice at 35 than he'll be at 25. He might be one of those guys.
Yeah.
He might be a guy who's constantly improving his whole career. And while he'll never be a great skater, he'll always be a powerful one. At least he'll be a guy who is able to be a really good player with what he's got, because he keeps on making it a little better year by year.
Yep.
Skating gurus, I look at him and I want to fix him. I want to recreate him. I want to reinvent him and say, okay, here's how you. First thing I saw about Ryan Donato is how much he skated like his father, even though he's a much taller guy. It's like certain people, like you got straight up skaters like Pete Mahavlich. You got Donato's, back is almost parallel to the ice when they skate. In the case of Poitras, there's something about the range of his stride that I would like to see extended with their skating coach, and see if they can make him a little faster. And it might take him, the calibration and the growth and the maturity, all of that blends together like you got a kid that young. That might set him back a little bit before he gets really good, Right. So the AHL thing is certainly not out of the question for him.
Yep.
I tend to be thinking it, and I know that the people involved tend to be kind of let's let the kid mature and see what happens here, rather than trying to recreate anything aggressively. So I think that's probably what will happen with him, unless, like you said, he comes in and is super confident, is making plays, producing scoring chances, and every other aspect holding up his end of the bargain.
Basically, Mick, if he looks like he did last training camp, then he would come in and win a job. Like if he comes in and does what he did last a year ago. If he looks like the guy, my shoulder's still coming back, I'm not really quite right, then you definitely know that's going to be the outcome. They do have a second line wing position open, and I wouldn't assume that Fabian Lysell is going to get the first crack at it. It may be that I feel like he needs to be impressive in camp as much or more than Poitras does in order to nail down a chance, the first audition
at second line right wing as opposed to being somewhere lower in the charts. And that makes me think that Geekie would be the first choice since he finished the season centering a top six forwards. I feel like he earned an early shot at being a contingency plan for second line right wing. I think that Poitras holds up his end of the bargain. He's the third line center. And then I think that Kastelic is probably with Beecher on the left wing. So that's how I'm looking at it.
All right. So your 4 centers would be who?
Well, of course, you got Coyle and Lindholm in either order to decide what your pairings are.
You got
Lindholm with Pasta. So then you got Coyle, and then you got Poitras if he shows up ready to be the guy he was at the beginning of last season. If he's over his shoulder surgery and he looks like he's eager and he's confident, then I think then you should start with him there. And then I think that you probably want to put Kastelic in the middle and Beecher on the left wing.
Okay, so you got Lindholm,
that's probably
Lindholm, Coyle, Poitras, and Kastelic.
Yeah, and then I think Geekie is probably going to be helping out wherever you need him, and that might be second line right wing, pending what you get from other interested parties.
Yeah, no,
looking at you, Fabian.
There's a lot of combinations and permutations. We all know, like Jim Montgomery.
We'll probably see them all.
Play around with the combos.
By the holidays.
Take a look at everybody. Absolutely. So everybody's going to get their shot and their look. I think Matt Poitras and how he comes into camp is definitely an X factor because that'll dictate a lot of what happens in the bottom 6, and it'll be interesting to watch. Mick, thank you very much for joining us. Let's also thank our sponsors. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's fun and pretty simple to use. Just jump in, download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Also, we've got Game Time. Thank you so much to Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets this summer and early fall with Game Time. It's the place to go to get sporting events, but concerts as well. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Mick, thank you very much for joining us. Everybody else out there, thank you for listening. We'll see you at the rink.